Hey guys, welcome back. So now once again, out of my MK11 excitement to where as of today, Robocop is playable. So I thought, why not talk about Frank Miller's Robocop vs. Terminator? And hopefully by the time this video goes live, I will be playing. But I wanted to do this mainly because I'm excited for the game. But on top of that, I also wanted to do this video just to get into one of the imaginings that tied these two backstories together. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping right into what originally was like a 4-part series, it just dives into what was like the last battle between Skynet and the remaining members of the Resistance. And like this last mission was set up by John Connor, who had pretty much staged this battle that couldn't be won, so that one of their Resistance soldiers could make their way through in order to steal information about the beginning of Skynet and then make their way back in time in order to stop it. And this infiltration was done by one of the Resistance soldiers by the name of Florence Langer, who had made her way in and discovered that the former rumors she had heard had been true about Skynet being developed from merging a human mind with software to produce this highly advanced artificial intelligence. And as it turns out, the mind that they originally had used was Alex Murphy. And with no time to waste, she prepares herself for time travel with really just a name and a general date. And she's like, whoever this Alex Murphy dude is, I'm gonna kill this guy. And so of course, much like any of the Terminator lore, she can't take clothing back with her, she can't take any weapons, but when she arrives in this past version of Detroit, like there's no shortage of guns. And literally everybody has a gun, so the first person she meets, which was a cab driver that nearly hit her because she just appeared in the middle of the street, but after seeing him she takes his gun, then she takes his car. And from there she finds a listing for Alex Murphy, because back in the day everybody's information was in the phone book, which was probably done away with because it was easy for time traveling killers to just look up people, or even regular killers for that matter. But she finds his address disturbingly quick, and when she arrives here she discovers that Alex Murphy is already dead. But even still with seeing this, she knows that he's out there somewhere, and mainly because she has partial records of him becoming Robocop after the time of his death. But this also lets her know that the time that she's here, she's come back too far ahead, and with her having to face him as Robocop, he's gonna be a lot harder to kill, and for that reason your regular firearm just isn't gonna do the job. But with knowing this, Florence then begins to build the closest thing she can to a plasma rifle in order to increase her odds of completing her mission. But while she's putting together this new plasma rifle, she's then approached by ED-209, which are also in Robocop's intro. I'm super excited about that, but it approaches her and her gun initially just doesn't work. And so now just as a quick refresher, the ED-209, which was designed by OCP, it was the original flagship soldier and tank wrapped up in one. But this design under the leadership of Dick Jones was sabotaged by Bob Morton so that it would kill a board member during demonstration, giving Morton the opportunity to get his plans for the Robocop project off the ground. And at this point in this present, I want to say there was like a couple hundred ED-209s on the street who would also patrol aside from Robocop, but even at their best they were still clunky and far from a challenge for a Resistance fighter who's used to fighting technology that was manufactured decades into the future. But after taking down the ED-209, Florence then makes her way to the police station to where she steals an access card to get in. And with coming here, she makes her way to find a tracker that's designed to find Robocop's exact location at any moment. And of course, when we jump to Robocop, he's out there just bodying dudes with that Auto 9, which I think in the movies was like a modified Beretta 93R. But this also reminds me like one thing I'm hoping when I get to play, like with seeing him here, like it has me thinking like I'm hoping that they do the Robocop 2 skin, which like the image on the right has a little more detail, and it also goes for a bit of that titanium-esque rainbow steel kind of colorway. Just hoping for that, fingers crossed. Because with Rachel Monash's colors on top of Walt Simonson's art, it gives me a bit of that feel. But also when we get this look at Robocop, like just being on patrol and doing his thing, we also see like where he gets a call for a bomb threat, and the dude with the bomb strapped to him is like, step away, I'm serious. And he starts counting down and Robocop is like, of course you're serious. I understand that. And he just throws this dude like 50 yards away from the crowded area so that he blows himself up without killing anybody else. And he just walks off with like the 80s, 90s action sequence walk away from the explosion type thing. But it's not long after this where we see Frank Miller take like this unique approach of showing us two instances of the same meeting that's interrupted by another disturbance in the timeline. Because first, Florence finds Robocop, and without warning she hits him once to knock him down, and right after that she goes for the kill, which is how her original trip would have ended had she been the only person who had came back to the past. But as it turns out, that just wasn't the case, because after she escaped, Skynet had sent 3 other Terminators to follow the time signature of Florence and make sure she didn't complete her mission. And this is a lot of what I was talking about when I said they make Detroit look like Goon City, because there's people here in the crowd at a Pistons game, and I'm assuming it's a Pistons game, and probably not, because Robocop is morally known for having parodies of different brands, but there's people here at the game like with knives and guns in the crowd, which is completely insane. But what's pretty cool is how Frank Miller handles this, and he has the same instance change dramatically once these Terminators make their way back. Because this time when they do, first, Florence is critically injured in this whole Terminator drive-by situation that also allowed Murphy to get a quick look at the driver realizing that they're a part machine. But at this point, with Florence critically injured, Robocop orders for an EMT to pick her up, but all the while she keeps rambling how he's a monster and he is the cause of the world ending. But with her doing this is something that causes him to further investigate and go back and visit her once she's been checked in. Because at this point, though he doesn't know the full situation, he at least is curious because of what he saw. Because at this point, all he really knows is that whoever was driving that car that he had got a glimpse at, that they weren't human. And it's here where Florence explains to him the whole situation, to where it's because of the success of Alex Murphy, whose mind was successfully joined with mechanical parts. In a couple years from this moment, his mind will then be taken and merged with Skynet in order to initiate the Terminator program. And on top of this, she tells him like if he doesn't believe her, that he should just wait around, because eventually those Terminators will come back there for her. But of course he doesn't wait around. But he doesn't necessarily let it go either. And after leaving there, he then gets help to hack into the Pentagon and search as many databases as possible in order to find some slither of evidence that lines up with her story. And when he does this and gets connected in, it's then when he sees it for himself, because he finds all kind of data supporting that since he was the first mind to successfully connect with machines and to command them, to correct them, and actually make the Terminator program work, from there he was able to see further from it being his current probability to not much longer seeing all the numbers crunch, only to find out from there that this future for him was inevitable. But after discovering this and leaving and making his way back to the hospital, which he had left guarded by a couple of ED-209 units, but when he gets back, he tells them to be on high alert for cybernetic activity, and when he does this, they both start shooting at him, because once again, they're not that bright. But fortunate enough, right after this, the Terminators actually show up, which then allows Murphy to redirect the remaining 209 unit to focus its fire on them, and not him. And it's really like where there's this reimagining to where Alex Murphy is the cause of the whole Terminator program. Like with us seeing him control the ED-209 units, it's like a bit of a foreshadowing for that, because not only is his mind successful at working with his own cybernetics, but also it's an example of him making other machines better by correcting the ED-209s, which he had been making use of even prior to this point. But even with that, I can't stress enough like how much the ED-209s are useless, because even after blowing up this car, when these Terminators come out, Robocop for the most part is essentially just on his own, and amongst the 3 T-800s that were in the car, who had taken on the form of a man, woman, and child, the ED-209 was only helpful at taking out the smallest one, which left Robocop to take out the biggest one, while the second biggest one made its way to a sniper position. But while all of this calamity was going on, which also caused significant damage to the hospital, Florence was then able to make her way out, find her gun, and take out the remaining Terminator, who was attempting to disable Murphy so that her and the other T-800 could secure his mind for Skynet and go after her. But Florence ended up finding this Terminator, because campers never prosper, and she blasted it to pieces, which then destroyed the last of the Terminators who had came back to this timeline. But in addition with seeing this, it also took its effect on Florence, because in this case, with actually having the time to see Alex Murphy fight against these machines, she then grew compassionate for him, and from there she had hoped to find another way to be able to change the future. But instead, from this augmented timeline, the same future eventually played out. And though slightly different, it essentially was the same result. But what was different in this case, it's that eventually in this future, humanity had finally won. But just before they did, the Terminator set back 2 units, one in the form of a boy, one in the form of a dog, and they make their way back to the present not long after the hospital incident. And when the 2 arrive, they find Alex Murphy at his own grave, to where they find him here, Murphy has been having visions of what this new future could possibly be. In this Terminator that's come back, it tells him that this future with Skynet is his purpose, it's his destiny, and rather than fighting it from happening, he should just commit to the cause. But with hearing this, Murphy's pretty much like, okay, no. And he scans and confirms both units and he domes them both. But what's crazy is that these two machines, they really try to plead with him and convince him that siding with the machines is a righteous cause. Because from their perspective, he's a god to them. Because the data from his minds and the scanning of his mind is what taught machines eventually to be sentient. And in this case, when the dog goes full scissor face, it doesn't end well for Murphy and they successfully take his head and proceed their attempt to connect him to Skynet. But with doing this, Florence then finds her way back to what's left of Alex Murphy, to where it's here where Murphy tells her to kill him now, but she's not successful in her attempt, and instead she is then killed by the two Terminators, who at this point have finally succeeded at getting the mind of Alex Murphy. And from there, the inevitable future actually happens. Murphy is merged with Skynet and Judgment Day takes place. And it isn't until years later where Murphy takes what's left of his humanity and copies that full remaining portion into a custom designed model that is physically like your best Terminator and Robocop both put in one. But in this case being operated with a copy of his human consciousness, who at this point in the future, he'll do everything he can to make things right. And I'm not gonna front. Once again, I hope this is another skin that is playable in MK11, although I do realize that it probably won't be, mainly because the variants in it are so drastic. And I mean, even with that, it could still be a thing, because some of the skins are drastically different, much like the one for the Batman Who Laughs or even Medieval Spawn. But we'll see. And like I said, by the time this video goes up, I'll probably know. But at this point in time, with Alex Murphy now being a part of this future, he then begins to make the difference. And after saving a number of the Resistance fighters, he eventually meets Florence again, but of course at this point in the future, he meets her before she actually goes back to kill him, and for that reason she doesn't really know who he is, or at least not to the extent of the memories that he has when she had previously went back in time. But even much like then when he had proven himself to be a protector of humanity, much like he's doing now, this once again gained her trust, and it caused her and other Resistance members to welcome his contribution in the battle. But not long after joining the Resistance, while many of the humans are getting rest, there's a huge pop in the sky, and it's mainly because Skynet has ordered everyone to be nuked. And when Skynet does this, it's pretty interesting because it's almost like it had saved nukes from Judgment Day, almost like a last-ditch effort. Because even though highly effective at any point in any timeline, but in consideration to this point in the future, nuclear missiles are considered like an old technology or old weapon from an old age. But even with that, this is something that Murphy also uses to his advantage, because this far into the future, they're not considered smart weapons. And for that reason, he's able to take off, attach part of himself to it, and redirect the missile to another location where there are a large number of Terminators. Which in this case just makes it a good thing that he was modular, because if those leg rockets wanted to detach, that would have been the end of the story. But with the remaining portion of him making its way back into the atmosphere, he immediately contacted Florence to get him back to Skynet so that he can make repairs. But while they were there, she gave him the idea to where instead of just making another version of himself, why doesn't he just build a whole army? Which is a good idea that makes a lot of sense. And granted, the first time around this wasn't something that he could do, because initially to escape Skynet, he had to create something quick and just get out of there. But at this point, after nuking a large number of Terminators and creating some extra time, he was then able to create a whole army of Robo-Terminators to take out the remaining machines. But finally, with reaching this brink of success, this also triggers that inevitable ending where Skynet tries to send another Terminator back in order to prevent this outcome. But with Alex Murphy having escaped the machines, both he and Skynet come up with this idea. But with doing this, first he travels to Skynet, who actually tries to offer him a simulation of like this augmented reality to where he would live here in this simulation, which would be much like the past, but in this life he would be human and essentially live forever with his wife in Florence, which was a very tempting offer for Alex. But on the flip side, the same reason that he was able to resist this is the exact same reason that he succeeded at being Robocop, which is mainly because his call of duty has always been greater to him than his desire for any personal gain, or even hope on a personal level, which is the exact reason why other candidates who were made to be like your Robocop 2 or your replacement for Alex Murphy, all those other officers failed, because once they realized hope for a regular life was gone, they either went crazy, committed suicide, or both, which was crazy. But in the case of Alex Murphy, with resisting this offer, which is what you do when you're part of the resistance, you resist things, but with resisting this offer and inputting a destruction protocol into Skynet to destroy the remaining machines, he then buries himself in a huge pile of flesh in order to travel back in time. And when he does, he destroys the original Skynet satellite that was planned to be merged with Alex Murphy from the beginning. And with doing this, he sets the course for a much better future. Because for Florence, who still would have eventually died in the battlefield even though they won the war, but now without Skynet, she's born in a more peaceful future without Skynet taking control. And also with Skynet destroyed, Alex Murphy no longer has this haunting feeling in the back of his mind to where he feels like he's being analyzed to be merged with this killer software from some satellite floating in the sky. But finally after this, we do discover that Skynet did send another Terminator back just before being destroyed by the future Alex Murphy. But as it turns out, this Terminator was then sent back to the prehistoric age because apparently for Skynet, setting a time machine and running a simulator at the same time, it was like chewing gum and walking. And when it sends like your dog Terminator back to the prehistoric age, it doesn't even last like a minute. Like a T-Rex steps on him and he's done. And that's it. But real quick, I want to give a shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link down below to where you can head to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And also let me know if you want to get into any of the other matchups between Terminator and Robocop, because there are a few different imaginings of this matchup. But let me know your thoughts down below and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.